Welcome to Ranting and Raving. In addition to being a football nerd, basketball nerd, and debate and argument enthusiast, they're different things. Trust me, I love both of them. Being into politics and being a giant fantasy nerd as well. The books, not the other stuff. We're not going to talk about that on this channel. I'm also a huge video game buff, as you probably have guessed from the background. And like anybody, I have my favorites. So I said when I did the the summary for this channel, and I think I put it in the description as well, some things I'm going to talk about are going to be objective. We've discussed some of those over the last couple of videos. And some things are going to be subjective. They're just opinion. These are my opinions. Some of them I'm very passionate about. Some of them I'm somewhat passionate about. And you guys are going to be able to tell which ones are which pretty quickly and easily. But regardless of which ones it is, these are my opinions. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy them. Subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff. But let's get right into it. So this is going to be my top 10. Now, this is a mix, so it's not top 10 of each. It's just my top 10 games from the two genres that I've really invested the most time and energy and enjoyment into over the last 21, 22-ish years that I've been playing video games. And so we're gonna kick it off. We're gonna start with the FPSs, first person shooters, if you're not familiar with that. So just so you know, this is not a top 10 list in order. It's more of like a tier system. Like it's in my top 10 versus like it's my favorite of all time. We are going to do a few of these on the channel, but this isn't one of those. The reason I have Doom first, and I know this is an image from Doom Eternal, but I'm also referencing a original Doom as well. So there was another game that was going to be in this slot. But unfortunately, that game actually gets beat out twice. So the game I was actually going to put here is kind of the OG game, the game that kind of really got the genre running. I was actually going to put 007 GoldenEye from the N64. And for people anywhere around my age, we're not going to talk about that. 32, whatever. That game is iconic and classic, and it had a huge impact on the growth of the genre. But as the game that's like the OG, Doom is actually that game, not 007. Now, 007 GoldenEye is the game that really, truly brought the multiplayer first-person shooter experience to consoles in a meaningful way. Unfortunately, it gets beat out by the pinnacle of the franchise that really perfected that, which will happen on a little bit later on our list. But Doom absolutely needs to be on this. Now, I'll be perfectly frank. I haven't played a ton of Doom. I've played a little bit of Doom, a little bit of the original, a little bit of Eternal, not a lot of either. But if I'm going to make a top 10 list, it's just like, and I'm going to be doing these for basketball and football and different positions and different things. Just because you don't personally enjoy it, or at least haven't invested the same amount of time, effort, and energy in it, doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve its place of recognition. And for me, Doom earns that spot. If this was a top 11, GoldenEye would be on the list. If this was just a top 10 FPS of all time, and I was including game by game rather than series and things like that, it would also be on the list. But it's not. This is my top 10, and 007 got beat out by 2 games in the 2 categories that it would really belong on this list for. So it's not here, but Doom is, and it deserves to be. So now let's look at the next game on the list. Borderlands 2. Move this over here. So, interesting thing with Borderlands. Borderlands 2 is technically a first-person shooter. It's also technically an RPG. And what's really interesting about the Borderlands series, all, I think, 4 games and then all of their DLCs, is it's really bad. Except for Borderlands 3 in parts, but really all of them are kind of bad at any one of those things on their own. They're not great loot games. They're not great RPGs. they're not great first-person shooters. In fact, the Borderlands original game is actually a bad first-person shooter and a bad RPG, and yet it was somehow so irreverent, so silly, so stupid, and so much goddamn fun that it led to its sequel, Borderlands 2, which is one of my top 5 personal favorite games ever, period, regardless of context, nostalgia, anything. But I actually genuinely think it's one of the best video games that's ever been released. It has this wonderful combination of being well written, irreverent, funny, but also it actually has like a real story, a deep plot. You go through loss, you make friends, you get all of the arcs of like a well written story in this ridiculous, over the top, goofy, stupid game where you're just making things explode. And there's a thing called Butt Stallion. And if you haven't played the game, go on YouTube and type in Butt Stallion. And don't worry, it's not inappropriate. It's like completely a G-rated thing. It's literally a diamond horse, like a unicorn that shits out like stuff. Like it's not awful. If anybody's a parent worried about like messing up your algorithm or something, it's like it's so ridiculous. The main villain is a guy who's so rich and so egotistical and so pompous that he literally gets himself a diamond horse, and he tells you over comms, I'm going to name it Butt Stallion. And this sounds like it's made for the inner 12-year-old male in all of us. And it is, but I played this in my mid-20s, and I have a college degree, and I'm well educated, and I'm articulate and well spoken and blah blah blah. Stick my nose up. It just, if something's done well, it's entertaining and it's fun, and there's no reason to act like something that is well written, entertaining, and fun isn't great just because, well, you haven't outgrown that. Well, I don't know. People in their 70s are still rooting for football teams, baseball teams, and basketball teams, and those are things you play when you're 8 years old in fucking PE. So, yeah, I haven't outgrown this thing that I like. Get over it. Like, frankly, I'm kind of sad for you because you apparently lost things you like because you needed to feel better than other people. Hey, let me drink some wine. You know, whatever. And hey, if that's a thing you like, good for you. I don't. He's not a big wine guy. But anyway, so Handsome Jack is, I think really legitimately, he's one of the absolute best villains that's ever been put in a video game ever. And because of certain events that happen in the story, the game's old. I'm not like spoiler warning. I just don't want to do a whole thing on the game here and make this video three hours long, because I could do this for every one of these games. But the way he's written into the story, the events that happen, the things that he causes, the way he's presented. But the biggest thing to me is you really want to have a great villain. And I'm going to use Thanos in the Avengers movies, you know, especially Endgame and Infinity War as a great example for this. Thanos comes in and immediately two pieces Hulk. Just ragdolls the Hulk. That moment is so important for the rest of those two movies because it immediately establishes this character is not only a threat, but it's going to take everyone to beat them. Like, it's going to take an overwhelming victory by the good guys to win, but also it gives you something to root for as the viewer. Villains, they need stories, they need motivations. They don't have to be, a little bit sympathetic, which elements of Thanos was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense, but also you're a fucking monster. Jack, not really that sympathetic, just kind of a monster. But the thing is, like, you meet this character over comms shortly after he tries to kill you at the very beginning of the game. And he's literally obnoxiously talking shit the entire game. The whole way through the game, you've got this guy who you're trying to get to stop and kill on comms with you talking shit. Here's why that's great, though. By the time, and some real story shit happens that makes you legitimately hate this character beyond the fact that he's annoying. By the time you get to that boss fight and you finally have him beaten and broken and bloodied, and you get to fucking literally stomp on his head and make spaghetti, loot spaghetti, matter of fact, got some legendaries. It's a very rewarding moment. Even if you over leveled and got all the most overpowered shit and you completely obliterate the warrior, and it's the easiest, cheesiest boss fight ever. Even if you do that, the moment of stomping Jack's head into the ground, immensely satisfying. That's a good villain. I actually genuinely want to kill this guy. I actually genuinely want to beat this character. This character alone drives my motivation to win this game beyond just, ooh, I got a new shiny with bigger, better numbers. Nothing wrong with that. I like big shinies with bigger, better numbers too. But that's the reason why this game is on this list. It's not a great FPS. It's not a great RPG from a gameplay standpoint. It doesn't have an incredible engine. It doesn't have great graphics. But if you take all of the elements together, like its loot engine is completely abusable. But if you take everything together, and it's a great game, because newsflash, games are supposed to be fun and entertaining. And this game is stupidly fun, both of those things, and stupidly entertaining. So it's absolutely one of my top games. And we are still in the RPG section, or sorry, in the FPS session, which means we have to talk about the GOAT. Greatest of all time. Probably we'll do a video on just this game specifically at some point of why I believe that Halo 3 is the greatest first-person shooter that has ever been made and never to be duplicated, replicated, or topped. So I mentioned earlier 007 didn't make the list. Here's the reason 007 didn't make the list. What 007 started, Combat Evolved finished. 007 showed that you could make a multiplayer console shooter that was fun, interesting, engaging, and brought people together. Halo Combat Evolved showed that you can build an entire console franchise on one game. And not the way Nintendo does it, where they make the same game over and over and over and over, and they just slap the name of the game and like new title, and it's basically the same game, like 85%, but we did some new cool shit. And people will just buy it over and over and over. It's not that. Like, it's literally Halo Combat Evolved made the Xbox a thing. People bought Xboxes for Halo Combat Evolved. And kind of Fable, but really Halo Combat Evolved. And then the 360, and you had Halo 2, and then the pinnacle, Halo 3. Now, if there's any fellow Halo fanboys watching this, yes, Halo Reach, that story, that ending, huge kick in the dick in a good way. Weird thing to say, but like, holy crap, that story, so good. But the game, Halo Reach, it can't compare to Halo 3. Halo 3 is the most finely tuned, well-balanced, just mechanically flawless shooter. Let me put it like this. Halo 3 came out a long fucking time ago. I was in high school. This makes me feel old. Hopefully some of you guys are older than me when you watch this and makes you feel older, which makes me feel better. Long time ago. Halo 3, even when they did the Master Chief Edition and re-released it, Halo 3 still holds up. It doesn't even have sprinting, like all these things that we think are normal now in games, like we expect them. It doesn't have them, and it still holds up. It's still really good. The story is great. And look, if you were into the Halo games, when you actually got to play as or with the Arbiter, that was a fucking moment. Don't act like it wasn't. That was a damn moment. The storytelling was epic. The characters were epic. Hell, Microsoft and their fucking phones made an assistant called Cortana. That's the name of the AI in the goddamn video game that made their entire consoles, which now make billions with a B, exist. Halo launched a console. Halo catapulted a genre into the mainstream, and Halo 3 was the Chef's kiss, the moment of perfection for that franchise. Reach is a great game. Reach is not as good of a game as Halo 3. Speaking of the guys who made Halo 3, we have one last member of our FPS. And that's Destiny. Destiny 1, Destiny 2. Destiny came out in 2014. And again, this is my list. These are not in order. But if we're just talking the best FPS ever made, mechanically, button mapping, sounds, feel, environments, movement. I'm talking from a game design standpoint. I'm not asking about your favorite. We're talking the best shooter. Destiny has no equal, period. That is an objective statement. Titanfall 2, there's a couple of games out there that are kind of in its class, but they still fall short. We're just talking mechanics here. It is a almost flawless game from a mechanical standpoint. It's incredible, which again makes sense. The guys who made Halo 3 and Halo Reach also made this game. They know what they're doing. Now, I'm a huge RPG nut, and I'm a pretty decent FPS nut, especially if they're good, well done, fun games. I'm not into the sweaty Call of Duty campy bullshit. Yeah, we're going to make a realistic war game, but then the best way to run the game is to have a knife and to just run around the map and knife people, because that's totally realistic. No, it's immersion breaking and it's terrible and it's crappy. And then you also have people that are taking advantage of aim assist to quick scope snipe and use a sniper like it's basically a 9mm pistol and get guaranteed one headshots at impossible ranges because they're just abusing the computer instead of actually being good at the game. Fuck off. Not good. If you enjoy it, great. Good for you. Have fun. But I think it's shit. I think it's annoying. I also don't enjoy 12-year-olds screaming into my ear, telling me what a fag I am. And they don't mean it in the French cigarette way. They mean it in the, hey, hi, my dad's gay, and I hope you go play in traffic kind of way. That's my response to those little fuckers saying that shit. You can tell how I feel about that. No filters on this channel. No monetization either because I cuss a lot, but whatever. We're not going to worry about that ever. Won't get big enough. Back to the matter at hand. Brian does a lot of sidebarring. Destiny 2 to me is, at least so far, this is the best shooter I've ever played mechanically. Again, just fundamental game design, game development. This thing is unbelievable. But in recent years, really the last year and a half, it's really finally fully embraced the RPG side of what they are. It's still not really an MMO, but it has a lot of MMO elements to it. And it actually loses a lot of the bad elements of MMOs that I've never enjoyed, which I'm quite happy about. But the storytelling has been phenomenal. The Witch Queen DLC that they recently released, DLC expansion, whatever you want to call it, legitimately great storytelling. Twists, turns, good writing, a believable villain that they've been building to for multiple years. Callbacks, Easter eggs, anything that you would do as a writer to make something good, they did. You know, great voice acting. They've always had great voice acting. So, you know, it's in an incredible place. They're in the middle of an amazing story. They just did a phenomenal update. Like you can basically play to whatever play style and fantasy you have for your character. There's something to do for that. Me personally, I play a Titan. Why do I play Titan? I literally have, there's a third-party app you can use to make builds and quick swap to them. I have one I literally call Face McPunchy-san. In Destiny 1, you can't do it in Destiny 2. But in Destiny 1, I actually went out of my way. This isn't tracked anywhere. I just did it for my own enjoyment. There's a move called shoulder tackle. You run, you sprint, you shoot forward with your shoulder. It does a little bit of damage on the Titan. I literally got a killing blow on every strike boss in the game with shoulder tackle. It took an absurd amount of effort to accomplish something extremely stupid, but hi, that's playing video games. It's fun. We do dumb things for fun. And I started calling myself Face McPunchy-san because there was a great build where you literally just run around and shoulder everything pretty much endlessly as long as you got at least one kill. Fun. Oh, it's a gun game? Yeah, great. I'm not gonna shoot any shots. I'm just gonna punch things. And if you learned maps well enough and placement and timing, you could actually do it in Crucible too. I used to get a bunch of best around and those types of medals and literally not shoot a shot in a gun game. That's ridiculously fun. So what do I do now? Well, now I have Face McPunchy-san's final form, and I literally have done near end game content just walking around and punching things in the face. It's a ton of fun. Again, that's what video games are about. Does this mean everyone has to play Destiny? No. Does it mean if you play Call of Duty, I think you're scum? No, unless you're a racist little 12-year-old asshole calling people fags on the internet, in which case, again, go play in traffic, preferably moving. But other than that, like, I don't care. This is my list. Go make your own. Have fun. But Destiny is without question on my list. And in something that combines my two favorite genre of video games and makes it incredibly fun, like, yeah, you're going to be at the top of my list. But now let's go into the rest of the list. No more FPSs. Everything from here forward is an RPG, and most of these are JRPGs. In fact, I think actually all of the rest of the list is JRPGs, which, again, if you don't know, that means Japanese role-playing games. There are more Western role-playing games now, but a lot of even your favorite role-playing games that you think are Western come from Japan. Ever heard of the Resident Evil games? You probably played them. You probably enjoyed them. They're from Square. That's in Japan. They make good games. They make great video games. The PlayStation, which, by the way, the PS1 and PS2 is the pinnacle of gaming. Although I think we're about to hit another pinnacle now. Like, it's the industry's in an amazing spot, but really, currently, as of right now, that is the peak, that era. And so a lot of these games are going to be from that. So here's a game. I'm a big, like I said, I'm a big JRPG guy. That means I'm going to bring up a lot of games here that anyone who knows those genres are like, oh yeah, you're just bringing up the popular ones. Oh, well, they're fucking popular for a reason. But this is a game that absolutely deserves to be on this list. Again, incredible story, huge stakes, great characters, interesting setting, really solid gameplay. It's a PS2 game, so does it hold up? Yes, but not graphically. But again, you know, you're not judging, you know, you don't judge things. It's just like looking at Joe Montana and being like, yeah, well, he only passed for this many yards. Okay, well, how many yards did he pass for relative to his contemporaries? By the way, the receiver that has more receiving yards than anybody ever by like a fucking lot played under him and the guy that followed him. So, like, was he a great passer of the ball? Yes. Does pretty much every offense now still incorporate West Coast passing elements? Yes. Are the two best just passers of the football really the three best, Manning, Breeze, and Brady from the modern era? Those are the three best pure passers of the football ever. They all incorporated West Coast elements. They all did the same things Joe did great. That kind of validates, yeah, Joe was great. His numbers relative to his time show his greatness. Well, this game, relative to its time, shows its greatness. This is a fucking phenomenal RPG. If you're into the genre and you haven't played this game, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. You probably will not be disappointed. However, and this is really going to go for all of the remaining games in this video, these are all JRPGs. They're like 40, 50, 60, 80, 100-hour games, depending on if you're going to 100% it and how good at the game you are and whether or not you over level to be like 10 levels above every boss. I'm that guy. So understand, like you could be like 5 hours into the game and not even be like really even started yet. You're basically still in the tutorial. Like, actually, that's kind of the case with one of the upcoming games. Like, you're literally like, the game has barely even started. You're pretty much in the fucking prologue, and you can be anywhere from 5 to 10 hours into the game, depending on, again, how well you get through things, whether or not you get lost, how much grinding you do, etc. So keep that in mind. If you are not familiar with the genre and don't know what to expect, these games are expected to have time investment. It's like getting into like it's like getting into a TV series, you know, Buffy, Game of Thrones, Charmed, Angel. I'm just picking some of the ones that I've watched. Like, and they have many seasons. It usually takes a few episodes, especially if you start right at the beginning for shit to make sense. You got to build the world before you can put people in it. These games are going to do that too. So with that said, for fans of the genre, this might actually be the most controversial, in some ways, the most controversial member of this list, and that is Final Fantasy IX. In some ways, this is the most underrated game maybe in the genre's history. Final Fantasy VI has, and that game will show up in another list that I will do at another point in time. Final Fantasy VI has an annoying number of fanboys. At least annoying to me. And girls. We're generalizing here. It's actually borderline obnoxious. And it really only has one meaningful character, and that's the villain. And that's it. Final Fantasy IX is a incredibly well-written game. As far from like video game, especially video games in like the JRPG setting, actually has a pretty well-developed love story, which most of these do not have. They're terrible. They're arbitrary and contrived as hell. They're bad. And that's okay. That's not what the games are about. But if we're being objective, they're fucking awful. This one actually isn't. It's pretty well written. It's tropey as hell, but fantasy is supposed to be tropey. Yes, the evil wizard is going to destroy everything. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm here for. The reason we watch fantasy shows, read fantasy books, or play fantasy video games, which JRPGs usually fall somewhere within that genre, it's not because we're looking necessarily for something we've never seen before. In fact, it's a lot of times we're looking for what we've seen before, but we want to see it done well. And that's what Final Fantasy IX is, a well-balanced game with a great story, with excellent pacing, with good villains that build on top of each other, all the way until that final boss. Okay, the final boss really sucks. It completely comes out of nowhere. I think people on YouTube have like, no, though, they totally hinted at it. It came out of nowhere. The real final boss is the fight before the final boss, and the last final boss is the credit scene. That's the way I choose to see this game get over. But really, I've actually been able to replay this game. I generally can't replay story-based games that I've beat before. I remember too much, and it just doesn't have the same level of enjoyment once I've been through it multiple times. This is one of the few games I can replay over and over. I've probably beaten this 7 or 8 times, and I've 100%ed it a couple times, minus getting the Excalibur 2 because I just refuse to fast play the game. I don't enjoy that. So that doesn't count as far as I'm concerned. I did everything else. I even beat Ozma. I 100%ed it. Get off me. And speaking of Final Fantasy games, and also speaking of games where you literally can be 10 hours in and just get through the prologue. And yes, when you leave Midgar, that's the prologue. Welcome to Final Fantasy VII. This is the icon among icons for this genre. For what Halo Combat Evolved did for the shooter genre, Final Fantasy VII did for JRPGs. This is the game that brought the JRPG franchise, or sorry, genre, to the West. This is the iconic game that made these not only a household name, but mega money drivers. How impactful is Final Fantasy? Well, let's look at the Final Fantasy VII in particular. Not only is there the original game, which was incredibly commercially successful, then there's all the merchandise. There's the Dirge of Cerberus PS2 game. There's the Advent Children movie. They made a full-blown fucking movie as an actual sequel to the story of the game. It's actually pretty damn good, too. You look at the year it came out and the quality of that animation, that thing had a budget. Frankly, a lot of their CGI is better than some of the I've seen in Hollywood. Looking at you, Green Lantern. Then you have Crisis Core, which is a prequel and a damn good one. And it did some really good retconning, like making Aeris an actually interesting character. Sorry, guys, in the original version, she sucked and I fucking wanted her to die. Yes, I was one of the people that mass circle when the scene at the lake happened that all of you cried about. Yeah, I was, no, Team Tifa. Tifa's a fucking badass. She's fucking awesome as a character, not for the reason some of y'all are thinking. But like, yeah, didn't like Aeris at all. Then you get like Aeris with a personality and a character in Crisis Core. And then we got that version of Aeris In the remake, which is what you're seeing here, this is a game that was so damn good that they literally broke E3. Again, if you're not a huge video game nut, E3 is a thing that happens pretty much every year where they announce a bunch of the new games that are coming out. Well, when Square Enix, like a decade ago, announced that they were going to be doing an HD remake of Final Fantasy VII, it crashed the site. The nerds, we're Legion, in case you don't know, we crashed the damn site. This game has a huge following. It's not my favorite Final Fantasy. I'm not actually sure if it makes my 3 favorite Final Fantasies. But it's an incredible game. It's unbelievably iconic. It was massively impactful on the genre, on the selling power of the Final Fantasy franchise. Just that alone, forget the genre. Like, this game has, and the universe it created has moved fucking numbers. People who have never played a Final Fantasy game ever probably still will somewhat recognize Cloud or Sephiroth. Even if you don't know the name, you see the character and you go, that's the long sword guy, or that's the spiky haired dude. It's a real thing. And like I said, it's not even my favorite Final Fantasy game, either by gameplay, story, or just in general, but it's fucking amazing. Next on the list, again, we're just kind of going through a top 10 here. That's why you're not seeing numbers and rankings. This is one of the most criminally underrated games of all time, personal opinion. Dragon Quest VIII, Journey of the Cursed King is... So I mentioned RPGs and fantasy in general are kind of supposed to be tropey. So in case you don't know, the Dragon Quest games are always tropey. They're supposed to be tropey. It is the demon lord has taken over everything, and the mighty hero of destiny comes up, warrior of light, and slays the bad guy. Like, it's that. You know what's also tropey? Comic books. You want to go check how much money comic movies have made the last decade or so? Fantasy novels. Even though she's a crap person, and frankly, they're overrated as a book series, go see how much money the Harry Potter books have done. Newsflash, tropey isn't bad if you do it well. But Dragon Quest VIII, Journey of the Cursed King, is a great example of that. Excellent writing, really well paced, fantastic game. I think it's the of the Dragon Quest series, of which there are many, much more popular games in Japan than they are in the West. This things have like a theme park in Japan. Like, it's huge there. It's not as huge in the West. There's really only been 2 successful Dragon Quest games in the West: Dragon Quest VIII and Dragon Quest XI, which came out recently, which got was actually so successful it got re-released on multiple consoles, which was great to see as a fan of the series, because it means we're going to get more games. But 8 is excellent. It's everything you wanted. If you like Dungeons and Dragons, even if you don't, if you just like the idea of princes and princesses and dragons and bad guys and slaying evil wizards, and also just, hey, I'm going to do really cool sword moves and blow shit up. Great game. But the best part of the game is it doesn't take itself too seriously. The game is hilarious. So the guy you see in the bottom left there, the bandit looking dude, he's not actually looking, he's a bandit. His name is Yangus. He's hilarious. He's ridiculous. He's an idiot, but he is legitimately hilarious. The main character is a silent protagonist, so he doesn't talk. Jessica on the right there is awesome. Angelo, some people like him. He's very Legolasy. He wasn't my type of character, but actually a very well-written character. All the characters are well written. All of them have some level of tragedy they overcome. The game will make you laugh. It's a very funny game, but the game also is very serious, has dark moments, dark overtones, like real adult writing. This is not a children's game. Couldn't recommend it enough. So definitely has to be on my list. One of my absolute favorite games. Beaten it multiple times. Long ass game, especially due to the post game stuff. Long ass game, but worth it. And then I mentioned 7 is not my personal favorite. This actually is my favorite Final Fantasy game. This will have its own video on the channel at some point. My brother is actually getting into game design. Has a degree in it. We've talked a lot about it and argued a lot about it. He loves Final Fantasy 7 much more than I do, but we both agree. If you want to look at it in an objective sense, Final Fantasy 10 is the pinnacle of the series, and it might be of the genre. Like, for turn-based JRPGs, this is the best game. that's ever been developed. Might not be your favorite. Best and favorite aren't the same thing. But for me, this one happens to be both. Like, I literally have a save on two different, one on my PC and one on my Switch of this game. Literally have a save file just so that when I feel like it, I can go and play Blitzball. That's a mini game inside the game. I've beaten this game probably 20 times. I love the story. I love the writing. If you took out one damn scene, it would be the perfect JRPG. Unfortunately, that scene exists, and honestly, that scene is probably the reason for 80 to 90% of the ridicule that this game gets. The other 10% is Seymour related, and while he's a very well written character, seriously, just stay dead. I know that's the theme of the game, and if you understand the writing, it makes sense. Blah 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 blah. But seriously, just fucking die already, Jesus. But I'm not gonna go on as long of a tirade about this game as I can now. Yes, I understand the irony of that, even though the channel is called Ranting and Raving, because I am going to do an entire video just about this game. So the last member on the list, and this is by far the most recent game, even if I include the 7 remake, and that's Tales of Arise. So the Tales series have always been, they're really popular, especially with the passionate JRPG community, but they don't have necessarily the wide acclaim and the wide fan base that some of the other games have. Like they don't have the pop culture references. There's things from the Dragon Quest games that even if you're not big time into video games, you'll probably recognize. There's things from Final Fantasy VII, again, that you'll probably recognize. You won't recognize something from the Tales games unless you play them. But it's a great story. Again, tropey is all hell, but good tropey. Just good, meaty, bad guy, good guy tropey, but it really well done, well written, really well developed characters. That was my favorite thing about Tales of Arise, is all of the characters are well written, they're well developed, the love stories are well written and well developed, but they're not over the top, they don't take over the game, they're not cheesy and terrible. Like they're real. The world is made real. The villains are made real. Everything makes sense. It's not there just to be there like, oh, Goblin's supposed to be chapter 3, boxes checked, successful video game. And yes, there are companies that do that with their video games, and I hate them. These guys really took the time to craft and write a good story, to build a great world, to build great lore, to make a fun to play video game. And it is an action RPG, so it's not turn-based. Another game, and it is one of my favorites, but definitely doesn't make the top 10, especially on my best list. Would be like the Devil May Cry games, or like Devil May Cry 3, which is definitely my favorite. It's not quite Devil May Cry level, or Beautiful Joe, which is made by the same guys, or I think Metal Gear Rising, I think is another one. Again, made by the same people. It's not quite that level of over the top action, but it's more towards that than a turn-based RPG. So if you like something that's a little bit more kinetic, and you're looking for an RPG and you want to give these games a try, I would highly recommend hopping into Tales of Arise. It was a really fun game. I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was weight to the story. Again, it was an adult game, but the inner child in me was still quite pleased. And that is actually the last game on the list here. So thank you for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the list. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is my list. This is not empirical. I said a few objective things that are just facts throughout the video, but I said plenty of things that you don't have to agree with. I'm sure, depending on how many people watch this, there'll be some people that are going to kill me for not having GoldenEye on a list that includes the best RPGs and FPS of all time. And that's fair. It just got beat out twice. But if you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you guys subscribe. Even if you don't like my videos, go ahead, subscribe, bump that count up. And every time I make a video, you can just leave a comment that I suck and bounce. I'm cool with it. But I obviously would prefer if you guys have opinions, if you agree, disagree, whatever it is, would love you to put stuff in the comment section. And any comments, unless the channel actually gets big, which it won't, I'm annoying. Any comments that you guys put in there, I'm going to do my best to respond to and engage with. That's really half the fun of doing this for me. The other pass is just because I like to hear the sound of my own voice. Clearly, that's why I'm ranting and raving.